贸易、投资等领域。
51 African leaders are in China. They've been there for 3 days now for the China-Africa Summit. Beijing is hosting it. It's their biggest diplomatic event since the pandemic, also very significant for Chinese diplomacy and economy. You see, China's Africa strategy is or has been under scrutiny. Xi Jinping is trying to turn things around, and today he made some big promises.
In the next 3 years, the Chinese government is willing to provide 360 billion yuan of financial support.
3600亿元。
$51 billion in financial support. This will be spread over 3 years. The money will come in the form of loans, aid and investment. And that's not all. Xi Jinping also promised 1 million jobs to the continent, 1 million jobs for Africa. How will China generate these jobs? Through a range of development projects. 30 projects will focus on infrastructure and connectivity. China will also fund 1,000 small projects. Plus, it will give Africa more military assistance, both financial aid and training. A $140 million military aid package was announced. China will train 6,000 military personnel in the region and 1,000 police officers. So plenty of announcements. But what's the thinking behind them? Broadly, China is trying to achieve 2 goals here. First, gain influence in the global south, and second, boost the Chinese economy. That's what they're trying to do. Let's talk about the influence strategy first. Africa is an important part of this plan. It is one of the biggest players in the global south. The continent has 54 countries. There are 54 countries in Africa. Leaders from 51 of these countries are attending the summit in China. And Beijing is going to town with it. Let me show you a headline published by Xinhua. That's the Chinese state mouthpiece. This article talks about the Africa Summit. It says the event, and I'm quoting, the event illustrates China's vision and aspirations for the global south. Africa could be China's ticket to global south leadership. So Xi Jinping is going all out, trying to win over these African leaders. He is presenting himself as an all-weather friend of Africa.
I propose that bilateral relations between China and all African countries having diplomatic ties with China be elevated to the level of strategic relations, and that the overall characterization of China-Africa relations be elevated to an all-weather China-Africa community with a shared future for the new era.
A strategic partnership. That's Xi Jinping's promise to Africa. Now let's talk about his second goal, which is tied to the Chinese economy. China is Africa's largest trading partner. Africa is a big market for Chinese goods, and Beijing cannot afford to lose ground there, especially now when the Chinese economy is slowing. And the Western market is slipping from their grasp. The West is placing trade barriers on Chinese goods, so for Chinese producers, the global market is basically shrinking. And that makes Africa even more important for them. They cannot afford to lose ground here. But this trade relationship is one-sided, heavily skewed in Beijing's favor. The trade surplus stands at $64 billion. $64 billion in China's favor. Cyril Ramaphosa raised this today during the summit. He's the president of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa. He wants Beijing to address the trade imbalance. He said, and I'm quoting, "We would like to narrow the trade deficit and address the structure of our trade." Beijing responded to this. It struck a deal with South Africa. China will buy more raw wool and dairy products from South Africa. So how much money will China set aside for this? Has it made any commitments on financing or investment? Well, we don't know because they did not share the specifics. In fact, that was the case with most African nations. Big promises, but not many details. China was also non-committal on debt relief, an issue that the African Union raised today.
For many African states, debt relief is an urgent imperative to give debtor countries economies a vital economic breathing space. It is also desirable that, in the context of our industrialization effort, the portfolio of private investments in Africa should be sufficiently diversified to extend beyond the traditional field of mining and energy resources.
African leaders want China to do more. They want more loans, more financing, they want debt relief for struggling nations, and they want bigger investments. And on all these fronts, Beijing has disappointed them. Xi Jinping's $51 billion pledge makes for a great headline, but it is far less than what China has committed in the past. In fact, over the years, Beijing has gradually reduced its financial commitments to Africa. Between 2000 and 2020, Chinese lending to Africa increased five-fold over 20 years. It touched a whopping $696 billion. Chinese lending to Africa, $696 billion. Today, Beijing has committed just $51 billion, and that too over a period of 3 years. So why the fall in lending? Well, one reason is the state of the Chinese economy. It is weak. It can no longer support massive projects. Even Xi Jinping realizes this. So now he's talking about what he calls small and beautiful schemes. That's how he put it, small and beautiful schemes. Clearly, China's checkbooks also run out at some point. So they're changing tack and scaling back. Instead of big-ticket projects, Xi Jinping is focusing on smaller initiatives. Another factor is the rising debt levels in African nations. They're buried under debt. In 2020, Zambia defaulted on its debt. China was Zambia's biggest creditor. It owes around $6 billion to Chinese lenders. Ghana and Angola have also faced financial distress due to Chinese loans. And this has raised global concerns. The United Nations Secretary General was at the summit today in China. He raised the rising debt levels in Africa. He said, and I'm quoting, "The situation is unsustainable." So far, Beijing has mostly restructured loans. They've refused the demand for large-scale waivers. This summit was a great opportunity to change course, but that was not to be. China wants to do business with Africa, but strictly on its own terms and for its own gains.
Across continents, one powerful news source.
Bringing you diverse perspectives on the issues that matter.
We go beyond the boundaries to give you that little extra about every sporting moment.
So thank you for making Firstpost 5 million strong. We're counting on your support, and you can trust us to bring you the news unfiltered and unvarnished.
Climate change is on our doorstep. It's time for a revolution to take root. And it starts with 1.4 billion Indians. It starts with one tree for humanity, one tree for Mother Earth, one tree for our future. Project One Tree, a News 18 network initiative.
On the show today, the T20 World Cup bandwagon has moved across to the West Indies. What can we expect